Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Board of Finance to order. It's 7:31 on Tuesday, November 16th. I guess I'll start off. Staff circulated the agenda last week. Given that we just had the election a week and a half ago, we do need to, one of the items on our agenda is the election of new officers. Krista reminded me that I've been the most tenured member of the Board of Finance, and so usually whoever's the most tenured member on a different board will sort of act as the acting chair until the new officers are elected. Paul did remind me that he's actually served more years, just not more continuously, but he's not here. So I guess that leaves it to me.
Do you want to do public comment first?
Yeah. So I guess the first thing we'll do is item number 2 on the agenda is public comment. No one from the public is here. Jen, has anybody emailed you that they wanted to speak?
No, they have not.
Okay. So we'll move on to item number 3. So election of the officers. As you know, as I mentioned, that following the election, all boards need to kind of constitute new officers. Here we're going to have the election for chair, and then vice chair, and then secretary. So I guess first off, what I would do is I would open the floor to any nominations for anyone as chair.
So I nominate James Palin.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay. Hearing none, I would say thank you very much, and it's very gracious to be nominated, and I would, if voted on as chair, I will try to do my best to try to do almost 75% of the good job that John Zagronsky has done, and while doing that, I would ask for all of your support and helping me get there. So I guess I would have a vote. All those in favor of electing James Palin as the chair?
Aye.
Good.
Aye.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So that's okay. Next position will be vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair?
I'd like to nominate Dan Baumgartner.
Thanks, Dave.
I second.
Rob Cardone seconds. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Okay. Hearing none. Any discussion? Okay. All those in favor of Dan for vice chair?
Aye.
That's 6.
As vice chair, I'll try to do 75% of the job of Jim Palin and Frank Huck beforehand.
So now we're at 75 of 75, so hopefully we'll be operating at 50%. Okay. So the next election will be for the Board of Finance Secretary. Are there any nominations?
I nominate Taylor Carter.
Okay, is there a second? Dan
Second.
Dan seconds. Any discussion?
Third, and I'll fourth.
Any discussion? I assume, will you accept
Sure.
the nomination? Okay, all those in favor of Taylor Carter as the Board of Finance Secretary, raise your hand. Okay, that's 6-0. Okay. Well, so I guess the first the first real item on our agenda is going to be to discuss and take action on the appropriation for $84,000 for a drainage study. And so we have Ed Gentile here, who's Director of Public Works, who's going to give us some background on it and expand on some of the materials that were sent around in the agenda. Ed?
Thank you very much. Ed Gentile, Director of Public Works for the town of Darien. The appropriation request you have in front of you is for funding to do 2 separate drainage studies in 2 separate locations and areas in the town of Darien. They were picked and selected based on the fact that these watershed areas are not located in a flood hazard zone and had significant damage due to the last 2 storms, one in July and one in September. We have obtained proposals from a qualified engineering company that we use on a regular basis over the last 5 years. Very qualified in these types of studies. We are looking at the areas, the two areas that we're looking at right now are the Salt Box and Coach Lamp Lane area, and the Bailey and West Avenue watersheds. Scope of the work is going to include a hydraulic model, existing conditions. It'll look at the 50%, 20%, and 10% year storms. Those are the smaller size storms. They'll also take a look at the larger ones too, the 4, the 2, and the 1%. So I'm going from a range of 2%, 2-year frequency storms to the 100-year frequency storms, if you look at the old terminology that used to be used here to qualify those storms. So now, we all know the 100-year storm is our base flood elevation for designation by FEMA to be in a flood hazard zone. So after the existing conditions model is put together, a proposed condition analysis is going to be done, which means they'll run the model as to try to reduce, eliminate, minimize flooding in certain areas. What we're looking to do is try to keep the water in areas where it does very little or no property damage. We're talking about first floors, basements of houses, low-lying areas that where it could get into and do damage to personal property. The timelines for this work to get done is around 4 to 6 months, depending on the watershed. I would like to use and take advantage of the winter months right now where it doesn't rain to do these analysis. This would give me an opportunity to, if there's anything that we should or could do before April and May comes around where it does start to rain again, make some type of improvements, any type of changes, anything that would benefit the residents in the areas where we did these studies. Those are an opportunity to do. And it could be as small as changing catch basin sizes or a pipe or something that small that may come out of this analysis. And these analysis may show me that I need a larger project, somewhere in the $1 million range, to increase pipe sizes that take it out to Holly Pond, those type of things. The Bailey and West Avenue area is an area where there's a culvert underneath the railroad tracks. This area has never ever had been impacted by flooding before. The folks on Bailey that back up to this river, Cummings Brook, ended up with 3.5 feet of water in their basement. No apparent reason for it at all. That's one of the reasons I'm taking on that study. Should never have happened, in my opinion. Want to know why? Now there is additional impacted areas. I have a spreadsheet of all of the folks that have contacted me by email. Contacted Mark McEwen from the Darien EOC. I put a list together of all the places that had significant damages, put them on a map, took a look at the areas, going out and met about 20, 25 of the residents, just myself. I've had a highway supervisor, my assistant Darren Ostafine's been doing the same thing. We're trying to get out to take a look at all of these areas. Understanding that we are going to select a few to do drainage studies on. Others that we can actually do ourselves. Other areas that have impacts where we met some of the residents and put together a plan to do some drainage improvements on the sites, on the roadways, to kind of divert the water from, maybe jumping a driveway apron and trying to keep it in the street where it's collected in the catch basins and in the storm drainage pipes themselves. So there are other areas, we are focusing on them. I'm not just doing 2 of them, there are others that the scope of work is something that we believe we can handle in-house as of right now. And that may change after we get out there and take a look at it, or I do an analysis and find that I need some additional help. The selected areas were based on not normally flooding, I guess is a good way to put it, and that's why I want to stress. There are a couple other areas that did flood. I want to mention them. The Kensett area, the Kensett development flooded dramatically. They have hired a private consultant to do that analysis up there in their study. That's one that's going on also in Darien. There's also the move to have a public-private study done in the Corbin, Grove Street, Tilly Pond watershed, if you will. And we've had a couple meetings already to move that along. We're working on the scope of work right now with the consultant to see if we can come up with a plan to do the public-private partnership down there. And we've been approached by a couple of larger developers and property owners in that area to move that along also. So that's what we're working on now. I think that's covered my points. I know this is listed as an appropriation request, and something I think maybe Jennifer can help me explain a little bit differently on how the money is moved in. But the sooner that I can get the money in place to start these studies, I can get them started. Realizing the consultants right now are working in a number of different towns. So the sooner that I get on that list to get moving along, the sooner this is going to come up with some possible solutions and some answers. So, any questions you have, I'm here to answer them.
Any questions for Ed on this?
Hey, Ed, you talked about a spreadsheet. How many names are on it at this point, roughly?
I have about 110 properties fed. I
Reached
know,
out- Talking about that reached out to you, talking
reached
about
out to me by
the
email,
flooding
by phone
problems
calls, yes.
that they've had.
And I think Mark's list may be a little bit longer than mine, because he had a little different, different qualifications to contact him by. But for the most part, as I've said in other meetings, if you haven't heard from me, or you don't think I'm on that list, give me a call. I'm still meeting with some people. I'm doing some this week, as a matter of fact.
Has it been, from what you've seen so far, haphazard, or is it the areas that you're kind of targeting right now? Is it the usual suspects, if they want to call it that? Is it different areas? I mean, what are you seeing right now?
I get the usual suspect piece is the part where if you're in a flood hazard zone, you should have flooded. But, you know, the unfortunate part of that is the magnitude of the flooding, the size of the storm, and the type of damage that was done. You know, having water in your basement's one thing. You know, blowing in the garage doors, blowing in the doors, and having your furniture move inside the house and up onto the first floor, that's something else too. As you folks are aware of, we had substantial damage at the DPW garage. There was 8.5 feet of water in that back. We could barely see the tops of the garage doors. And I was told when I did the remodel, don't worry, it's never flooded before. So now it's twice now in the same year. So we're making improvements over there, changing our process, changing our policies and procedures on what to do when these things are coming. I'm doing the same thing with our sanitary sewer pump stations. I'm doing hardening, if you will, for flooding on all our doors, all our windows, all our ventilation that goes into the basements, raising up electric, raising up our generators. Those are all the things I'm doing with our facilities right now. So usual suspects, I think we added to that list significantly with the last couple storms.
That's what it felt like, the two ones in July, August, whatever it was.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
These two new areas cited in the memo, Salt Box, Coachland, and Bailey West, did both areas flood in both of the storm events? Or in
Salt Box and the Coach Lamp area did, but not to the extent it did the second time.
Okay.
Bailey did not, from what I understand. There was some water that came up to their houses are first floor up, basement garage below, and the river is at the garage level, if you will. Barely reached their driveway. This time, though, there was 3.5 feet of water. That's a big difference for two storms that I thought you should have seen the impacts of some magnitude. One you didn't, one you did. That's kind of telling me there's something amiss out there.
I'm sorry, similar, just to follow on that, what about Kensett and then Corbin Grove, Tilly? Did each of those flood once or both times?
I wasn't aware of significant flooding at Kensett the first time. The second time, absolutely. Grove Street had flooding in July. There's that famous picture of Reese Hutchinson taking the fish back to Tilly Pond. So they did get some water down there. I don't know how much damage it does to personal property. I know one of the buildings did have some damage only because the ventilation for their basement is at the level of the road. So as soon as that water got up over the curb, it was inside the basement. Those are the things. But the second storm absolutely had a lot of water coming down Grove Street, Brook Street. Tilly Pond was overflowing. Coons Lot was you couldn't even see it. It took the building right off its foundation.
One more, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. And when was the last time we had a neighborhood that had never flooded before flood?
I go back in my history of Darien, but it only goes back 7.5 years, and I apologize. I understand there were some areas before I got here
But not,
that had some.
in your experience, this was the first time something new was added?
Of this magnitude, yeah, every once in a while we do find some smaller ones that pop up, but it's more of an infrastructure issue that we can go out and correct somehow.
Two different questions. One is there a suspicion that somehow our town infrastructure failed and that's why it flooded? Are we looking for that potentially? And secondly, what prompted Kensett to hire a private consultant? Did they feel that the town wouldn't support an investigation of their flooding?
I think they identified a majority of their problems, and I don't want to speak for them, but the majority of their problems was on site. And being that it's a private property, they took the initiative to jump right in and bring an engineering company in to look at it. As far as our infrastructure goes, there's always opportunities, especially like this, to look at our design criteria and our capacity in our lines. I've said before, and I'll say it again, you can't use that last storm to gauge our magnitude of our infrastructure and whether it functions properly. But what you can do is go out and see where it did work well, where it did hold the water and take care of it. And that's why there are some areas that we're going out to right now, and we're cameraing the lines, we're cleaning basins, we're checking sizes and integrity of the pipes where we did have backups to make sure that those facilities are designed properly to at least a 50-year storm, which is what we use right now as the criteria. So I can't say we found any yet that weren't working properly. We did find some that needed to be cleaned. Those we did find. But the flooding was incidental and on the roadway. I'll give you a perfect example. Fairfield and West Avenue has just a ton of water coming down Fairfield, coming down West Avenue. One of the basins there was full, and it got full even more. Wouldn't take the water, so that water continued downstream. Those are the things we were finding. Those are the things we went out and corrected immediately.
What do you expect the next steps will be once you've completed your study?
Well, depending on what they find, there's either going to be, I'm assuming there's going to be some work that needs to be done. And the magnitude of that work will depend on what the study finds with the existing infrastructure. So if the infrastructure is undersized, you may see a request for funding to do a drainage project in that neighborhood. If it's something that we can change, let's say the basins were too small and we want to enlarge all the basins on that project, I may come in for a transfer of a certain amount of money to do 12, 15, 20 basins to make them the larger size ones rather than the old Hartford styles. They're 2x2. Nowadays they're 4x3. They're larger. Maybe that's an opportunity also. A good project that was done just as I had gotten here in 2015 and 16 was the drainage project on Intervale and Abbey and Holmes. And I can tell you that I don't have any calls or complaints from those last two storms on how that functioned in those neighborhoods. Not to say that anybody didn't flood, I'm just telling you, I didn't get any calls that tell me that it didn't work or function properly, which is saying something about that project, because I recall there was a storm previous to that where they had significant flooding in the low-lying areas, especially Abbey and Intervale.
I think it was about the same.
What's that?
Some of the properties, sorry, it's right where I am. So some of the properties were exactly where it was. So considering the amount of rainfall we had, especially Ed on the second one.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, there's a set of houses that go against the river that's there. They had about the usual, I call it the usual flooding, came about halfway up there.
This is they're the ones that back up to the road and river?
Yeah, this is on Park Lane,
Okay.
on the east side. If that makes sense. No, sorry, south
West.
side. Whatever, so it's near the
Yeah.
river.
Jim, I know we're going to have a conversation about FEMA as it relates to homeowner assistance. Have any of the projects we've done to mitigate flooding in the past qualified for, or have we applied for as a sub-applicant FEMA funding?
I wouldn't know that.
In your 7.5 years?
Not since I've been here, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
A couple questions. Ed, on the, in terms of the consultants that you're going to use, are these consultants that we've used on prior projects?
That's correct.
And who are they?
Ty and Bond.
Okay.
They've done a couple studies for us. They actually did the design for Intervale Homes area too. We use them to assist us with our MS4 report on a yearly basis and our testing to keep up with the DEP requirements for stormwater management. So,
Okay. And then one other question is, in terms of the study here, it's going to tell you sort of where the problems and choke points are. Is it going to also sort of give you an idea of what is possible in terms of, I think one of the things we've discussed before, if a certain investment or change only sort of lowers something from 5 feet to 4 feet, will it come back with sort of what the actual proposed effect of any of these changes are?
that's the idea with the proposed condition after they run it, what changes would be made and what improvements, if any, can happen from those changes. That's the only way to kind of gauge where you want to be with regards to infrastructure change and cost. Like you call it a choke point, that's a perfect example. If you eliminate that choke point, then what happens? If you move the water downstream, is there anybody in the way that's going to be impacted by that, significantly and adversely? So,
And what will the actual benefits be? Will this sort of alleviate potential flooding in 2 houses, 10 houses, or 20?
well,
20 houses.
I think the object here is, and I go in it with my eyes wide open right now, is we understand what happened to the water and where it went. I have plenty of videos and pictures to prove that, and neighbors telling me about it, and it was devastating. The idea is to keep the water where it belongs and where it does no harm. That's the idea, right? In our drainage systems, in our gutters of our streets, even flooding and ponding on water of the water on roadways up to a foot, I believe is something that, especially if it drains quickly, is something better than what I saw at the intersection of Salt Box and Salt Box East. That was just incredible.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, so I guess in terms of the funding here, what's being proposed is to take the $84,000 from our the Board of Finance capital contingency inside the reserve fund for capital non-recurring expenses.
Right, that would be the most expeditious way of doing it. The other option that you have discussed as a board before is you could put it forward as a special appropriation if you choose not to use your capital reserve, but then it will need to go to the RTM, and then once they meet, it takes another 10 days before the appropriation becomes effective. And typically, they do not do business at their December meeting, so it probably wouldn't hit their agenda until January. And from what Ed explained, with the 4 to 6 months, there is a bit of a timing concern.
And Jen, how much do we have in our capital contingency after the, or maybe net of the insurance proceeds from the pickup truck?
Not counting the insurance proceeds, because they're not in there yet. If this came out, you'd have 170,000. And then once the RTM approves the Board of Ed insurance proceeds, it would be up to about 253,000.
Okay. Well, yes, I've had some discussions with Jack on this, who, obviously has been the chair for the last few years of F&B. Explained to him, we've talked about sort of, as Ed indicated, this is something they want to get going as soon as possible, and sort of ahead of next spring's, unfortunate rainfalls and so forth that we may see. And I think he was supportive of, if we wanted to take this out of our capital reserve and not approve it here, at our board level and not do a special appropriation, I think, he was supportive of it. Jen, have you had any other conversations with him or others on this?
No, I have not.
I'm good with it.
Okay.
So the Board of Finance capital reserve, not the general fund, just our capital contingency?
Correct.
Right.
This would be the capital contingency within the
yeah.
broader reserve fund.
Right, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
And Jen, it's 250 with the 2 items you talked about before the 84 here coming out, right? So it's 250 minus 84, it was 170, you got the school board.
If this comes out,
Right.
it'll go down to 170,
Okay.
and then when the insurance goes back in, it'll go up to 250.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the summary of that reserve is in the back here, right, Jen?
Yeah, it is in the financial report.
So can I have a motion to transfer $84,000 for this drainage study from the Board of Finance capital reserve? Rob moved.
Second.
Dan seconded. All those in favor? It's unanimous. Ed, thank you.
Folks, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thanks, Ed. Thank you.
Okay, so the next item is to discuss and take action on appropriation for consultants that the town would hire to help in the preparation of FEMA grants. We've sent around some materials on sort of what that consultant agreement would look like, the different types of services that it would include. Wayne has also kind of prepared a memo, which I shared with you guys, probably an hour and a half ago, that talks a little bit about sort of what the town's obligations are and sort of how these grants work. I guess, Kate or Wayne, is there anything you want to give us a little bit of a summary here, and or Monica?
Good evening. I know most of you. I'm Kate Bush, the town administrator.
Okay.
It's funny to be back here, and none of you were on the Board of Finance when I was the finance director. So lots of change. This grant, or this appropriation, would allow us to hire a consultant, the firm Dewberry, they're a large engineering firm, to assist with the FEMA applications for the homeowners who, post-Storm Ida, would like to investigate elevating or an acquisition for their home. In the past, our emergency management director, who actually serves in that role on a part-time basis, he's done all the filing of the applications. We just don't have the capacity to do this number of applications. And right now, he's working with about 10 to 12 families who have indicated a desire to file for the FEMA assistance. This estimate, it's high, and if you saw the backup, the total cost that they estimated for going all the way through the data gathering, the analysis, the application, and post-award management approaches $200,000. What we're asking for here is funding to get to the point of the application. And there's a lot of assumptions made in this $110,000 number. It's assuming that 7 property owners will actually go forward to the point of application. We're assuming that the applications will be for elevations, not acquisitions. And the reason for that is the high market value of the homes here. The expectation is that most of them wouldn't qualify for acquisition based on, and it's a ratio of loss to property value. So, legally, we are the ones who must be the applicants. We're actually the sub-applicant of the state. Legally, the town is the one who does the applications. Are we obligated to do this for our taxpayers? No. But is this something that we should do? My belief is yes. The Board of Selectmen unanimously approved this last week. There's no other entity that's going to do this provide this kind of assistance for our homeowners. And we don't have the capacity with our staff to do it. So if we want to give our homeowners the best shot at these applications, we need to hire professionals who can assist us. So with that, I'll stop. I'm sure you have other questions.
Would the consultant help just with FEMA or with, I remember reading in the thing you sent around, Jim, that there's another assistance program.
The Small Business Administration is providing assistance. That's a different kind of assistance.
It was,
The individual assistance program.
yeah, the individual,
Yeah.
the
Yeah, no, they would
individual
not,
assistance
no, this
program.
is,
Yes,
this is
thank
for strictly the elevation and acquisition. The FEMA is gonna be in town for people to meet for the individual assistance, but that's for the smaller, dollar-wise. We're not talking about the.
But it can, well, my understanding is it can qualify, it can help with the 25% burden that the homeowner might have. This assistance
The
program.
IAP?
The IAP.
Yeah,
Oh, yes, if they received funding from that, yes.
Yes, so if they need 25,000 and they get 10,000 from the assistance program, they would need to find 15 on their own to meet their 25% requirement, is what I'm
Well, I
no
think
expert on
the
this, but that's
IAP,
kinda
I think,
what
which
I
is
would-
what they set up, there's going to be an organizational work at town hall, right?
Yeah.
Or sorry,
Yeah,
at the
I just,
library
as
that's
long as,
helping.
as long as
The
our
gym.
residents are aware of it, that's all my
Yeah.
only point.
Yeah, I think those are sort of smaller.
Those are smaller.
Lodging, food, other sort of basic necessities.
Right,
I think
things
that
like,
are
your
covered.
basement flooded and your boiler was lost. So, that's what they're doing, the individual assistance is for those kind of things. This is for, your home is in the flood hazard zone, and you suffered repeated losses. This is for you to either elevate your home so that you no longer have the water coming into your living quarters, or for, to enable the town to acquire your home and demolish it.
Regarding the applications, if a homeowner comes forward and they want to apply for a grant to raise the home where the FEMA pays for 75% of the cost of raising it and the individual homeowner pays for 25%, do they have to commit to actually move forward with the project? And the reason I ask is, obviously I think we had a call with, I joined you guys with a call with the consultants. They certainly seem like they know what they're doing, certainly seem like they are, some of them are from FEMA and so forth and are extremely knowledgeable here. But I know in the past we've had, I think maybe only one, but where a homeowner, where the town has sort of worked with them, done the work, prepared the application, kind of, which I understand is a fairly significant amount of just kind of resources and kind of brain power and so forth. And then decided not to move forward.
Yeah, that happened, yeah.
How do we think about how would we manage that to make sure, we're going out to get great resources, but to make sure that the homeowners are really sort of, really want to move forward because, in a situation like this.
I think the homeowners themselves are gonna have to invest time in data gathering along with the consultant, but, I'm not sure that there's going to be a good way to assess, when you push that button and submit the application, that if FEMA comes down and says, yes, we will do this, that they're going to be willing to, the homeowner will still be willing to go forward. Because with the elevation, the homeowner has to put up the 25%, it's not the town. So I'm not sure that you can judge in advance that, yeah, they will go through with it. And honestly,
Yeah.
other things could happen. There's no reason why they couldn't sell the property in the meantime. You might be dealing with a different owner. So, it is with all these applications, first there's the risk that we apply and get nothing. Nobody gets a grant at all. But there is also the risk that we apply, we get awarded, and the homeowner says, yeah, I've changed my mind.
And will these consultants, I noticed in the beginning there, one of the services here was they were going to have sort of like a public information session, and then they were going to have a few different individual kind of one-on-ones, and have a period of a few weeks where they're answering questions for these homeowners. Will they be conveying to them, and will they know really what the financial investment is for the
Yes.
25%, sort of what it entails, the time,
Yeah.
the energy?
Yeah.
I'm sure we're dealing with the federal government, so the frustration and so forth. Will they be aware of that? And I guess I just want to make sure, with not unlimited resources, that we're using them most wisely, with that people really want to move forward with this.
Yeah, they will be made aware of that and of the costs, and, especially if you're pursuing the elevation, that 25% is going to be on you. So they'll be made aware.
Okay.
Sort of tagging on to that same point, when I look at this chart, you have task number 3, which reads BCA go, no-go screening. And that comes before the grant application development process, which is stage 4. So if I total this up correctly, if all 7 were to go that far, that only totals out to $67,000, which would still be less. So
Well, we're going from the project management.
task 1 to
One to
task 3.
Yeah, no, the ask is for task 1 to task 4.
No, I understand.
Oh, yeah, if you only go to task 3,
But
yes.
If a homeowner is in the process, right, and they're going through gathering all the data, doing all the work, all those kinds of things, and they get to task 3, and the opinion of the consultant is you don't qualify, right? Then they're effectively.
Then there's no task 4.
They're effectively dead, there's
Yeah.
no task 4, right?
Yeah.
So, to the extent that anyone starts to get that type of data prior to, we could see some dropout earlier.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dave. Or John.
Okay. Quick question, what is the ceiling market value above which FEMA won't participate?
I don't know that there is a ceiling.
You mentioned that there are levels above which FEMA will not lend.
No, the issue is that our market values, so in order to qualify for the acquisition, you have to have had a level of loss relative to your market value that is, exceeds a certain amount. So that's where the issue is for us. If you have a home that's worth $1 million, you have to have losses of 500,000 or more. So that's the harder thing, is accumulating those losses to come up to the number where FEMA will say, okay, your losses exceed this percentage of your home's value. Now we'll award the grant.
So those losses are cumulative to the extent that there have been prior claims?
Yes. David's remembering his lessons from the Board of Selectmen.
And do we know how many of these 10 properties have prior FEMA claims?
I do not know the number, no.
Okay, so we don't, that'll be part of the screening process for
Yes.
the early stages to figure out where they are.
Yeah.
But to David's point, I think what FEMA's looking at is they're doing this in their own sort of self-interest. They're saying, we've paid out this many claims over the past 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
We don't want to pay anymore.
And we think we're going to pay these many going forward. So they're making a decision to say, if I sponsor 75% of the cost of this homeowner to raise their home, then I'm going to decrease my payouts going forward.
Yep.
And then that homeowner's insurance that they're paying to FEMA, I think naturally comes down.
Yes.
If they improve, if they mitigate their house. One question, to the point about getting to the BCA, the benefit cost analysis. Do we have a sense, or has staff or Board of Selectmen thought about, is there a certain BCA, like the consultants mentioned, they usually don't recommend putting things forward unless they're like 1.3 or 1.4 to 1.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have a sense of, like, if residents' homes, because there is a lot of time and energy sort of and expenses in terms of putting these forward, if somebody was 1.1, like, is there a sense about how you guys would think about submitting a grant if it was a very low likelihood of getting approved, because going from task 3 to task 4 does require like engineering studies and a lot of additional work?
So do you mean, would we think about saying even, yeah, you're at a 1, but we're only going to apply?
Yeah.
Well, I haven't thought about that.
Do they have to submit the application in order to have it be a, quote, registered FEMA claim for
No, they have to,
consideration?
that comes from having submitted the insurance claims.
Okay, all right, got it. So that's a separate thing. All right.
Do other towns have similar processes? Could you
I would
tell
say
us
it varies. Some towns have full-time emergency management directors and grant writers and things like that, so they can do it in-house. We're not big enough for that.
How about incurring the costs for the homeowners? Do all the towns-
Hiring consultants?
No, do all the towns,
Not all of them, no. No, some do.
could you name them, some that do and some that don't?
Could I name some?
Hmm?
I'm trying to think of the ones that Dewberry told us in our phone call.
Yeah, I think there were some, I thought they mentioned, some covered all either in-house or pay for consultants. Others, I thought they mentioned Westport.
Yeah, that was one.
Residents use sort of a sort of local resource where they pay for it and then sort of bring it, I don't know if it's like fully baked or whatever, but bring it then to the town and sort of less resources. It sort of seemed like it ran a spectrum from some towns that kind of cover all those services and some where the residents have to bear some of those costs.
I guess on that note, I was gonna ask, if we were to determine as a town, whether it's Board of Selectmen or whoever, that the homeowner does have an obligation to cover these costs for the town, do we still need to make the appropriation to engage the consultant to do the work and then they'll be reimbursed by the homeowners, or could we?
By the homeowners to assist with the application process?
Yes.
If we're gonna write the checks, we'd have to have an appropriation. If we were gonna suggest to the homeowners that they should pay for the assistance, I'm not sure why we would act as the middleman. We have to file the grant. We're the ones signing off on the grants. But if they wanted to hire their own consultant to help complete all the paperwork, I don't think we would want to run that through the town.
So is the filing of the grant our only obligation as a town, and can we handle that with our existing staff?
No, we can't. Not, you know, it's a lot to do one, and we're talking about up to 10 here. And Mark's role as emergency management director is supposed to be 50% of his time. He's also our deputy fire marshal. And so not only does he not have enough time, you know, we also, right now, we have the 3 major renovation projects, plus Oxbridge School, which is taxing the resources of the fire marshal's office as it is. So to ask him to take on all this work for all these homeowners in addition, I just don't feel we have the capacity to do that.
I mean, I do struggle with the idea of appropriating tax dollars to help a few individual homeowners.
I understand.
So do we understand how they do it in Westport? Like, are they going, I mean, how would we behave in a way like Westport? Is that turning this down, or is it appropriating something else, or doing something differently?
I would have to speak to them to see exactly what process they follow, but I would imagine it's just as simple of, you know, you get us all the paperwork and we'll submit it for you, but that's as far as they go. But I'd have to talk to them.
Can I answer? So, also, we are responsible on the town level to manage the grant, and if this process can take 3 years. We're responsible for the quarterly reporting, and we're responsible for signing off on the applications. So, in my opinion, hiring a professional, especially in this case, being able to tap a resource that was a deputy hazard mitigation officer for the state of Connecticut for 9 years, who has done this, I think it's a really good opportunity for the town.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I think and my concern is who bears the cost.
Yeah, no, it's a difficult question because we're asking for a chunk of money that benefits a specific set of property owners. And, yeah.
So this is to get to the application process?
Yes.
And assuming that 7 go that far,
Mhm.
right? So if 5 are approved, to Monica's point, the town is responsible for continuing oversight and management of that process. Presumably that consultant will remain engaged?
Yes,
to
we would have to
assist us
come
with
back,
that.
we would have to come back for additional
We
funding.
would have,
for that.
and that's not in this appropriation?
That is not in this appropriation.
So where I'm headed with this is, and I'm also thinking about the town's flood mitigation efforts, not on behalf of homeowners, but on behalf of the town
Mhm.
writ large. And if we're gonna be spending more and more time with FEMA, on behalf of homeowners or on behalf of the town, at what point does it make sense rather to continue to pay a consultant to actually have an in-house, on-staff resource, whether it's part-time or full-time? That is expert in FEMA.
I don't know how
Generally.
much time, you know, when it comes to our other drainage issues, I'm not sure how much time we'll be involved with FEMA regarding those. You know, I think one thing that I hope the ARPA Guidance Committee, Advisory Committee will be looking at is stormwater management is an allowable use for those funds. But that's not going to involve FEMA in any way. There are other FEMA grants available, different programs,
Yes.
where we could get funding to help with stormwater management projects. Those are a lot more competitive. But, that's a possibility that we might someday hire a consultant to help us try and get some of those funds. I'm just not sure that we're at a point where we could support a full-time FEMA grant writer person.
John?
We're talking about 10 properties here, assuming the town were to fund this 110,000 or 196 or whatever the other number, the higher number is, and so on. To do it, what degree is the town, if not legally, morally, or ethically obligated to do the same thing and fund the same amount for any other homeowner who comes in and wants to take advantage of the project? I mean, I look at this and sort of on an overall basis, and it appears that it's well tied down and so on, but it looks to me as if it's a best case scenario. By no means a worst case scenario, or not that there's good and bad and so on, it's just they're typically a spectrum of outcomes on this. And where, in fact, could the town end up if, in fact, it approves this, and again, if not legally, with Mr. Fox sitting back there, morally or ethically obligated to fund all of this, what would that number conceivably be? And is the town prepared to, in fact, incur these kinds of costs going forward? And it's fine if the town is prepared to do that, but and if the town has a policy, fine. If the town doesn't have a policy, should a policy be developed quickly so that we can go forward?
Yeah, I mean, and Kate, could you talk to the contract, I think, is a not to exceed, right?
It's not to exceed.
So I think, John, I think to your point, if the number was only 10 that are screened and 7 that apply, they're committing to kind of take those 7 projects all the way through for not more than 196.
Yes.
But again, John, if more pop up,
If more pop up, if there's another storm,
Yeah, then that's-
I think the point more is like, what happens when the next storm comes and there's 5 more homeowners who want to apply for assistance, or, even with these families, if they get turned down this time, what's our obligation the next time? Wayne can maybe answer the legal thing. I don't think there's a legal obligation to do it every time. I don't think this forces us to do it again the next time.
If
It's
not
the
legal,
moral and the
then-
ethical obligations, and that's actually what you have to decide on this, And that's you're the next step in deciding that, so.
just in terms of, because when someone does apply, they choose, or when we apply on behalf of someone as a sub-applicant, they either choose that they want to raise the home, or they want to consider the demolition and sale of the home, or purchase of the home by the municipality. As part of that process, are we going to make it clear to those that are choosing the option to demolish and have it acquired by the town? I mean, that is still, ultimately, if that grant is approved 1, 2, 3 years from now, that'll still be, will we be making it clear to those people that it's still subject to the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance, and the full RTM 1, 2, 3 years from now, sort of approving that? And I think they've done.
I think that's important to do.
Yeah, because I think it's important to make sure we set expectations that even though we're bringing in the consultants and so forth, that there's still sort of another step, down the road.
Yes.
Yeah, to Jim's point, and to your point, because I think you hit it right, I think we have to develop a policy. And Jim I was actually going to say exactly what Jim said. I don't want to set expectations here for people who want town to eventually buy their house, that we're going to do it, right? I think to a certain amount of us here on the board, putting this next step up, right? Like you said something interesting when you went to the podium, Kate, you said something like the town should do it, but I didn't hear a reason why, to be honest.
Because we're the only ones who can. When it comes to buying the home,
Right.
we're the only ones who can.
Not buy the home, I'm saying start this.
Start
just
this
do
process?
Start this process. To me, you start the process here, right? That's one dilemma, if you want to call it that, for us. Then the second dilemma is, if it gets to the second part, which is either raising the house, or to Jim's point, buying the house, I don't want to set expectation that we're going to buy every house that somebody's going to choose to demolish, honestly. Like, I don't think it's fair, but I think it comes back a little with Monica, to you, or whoever it is, to formulate a policy.
Which ones we should buy.
I don't think which ones we should buy.
Yeah.
what's the criteria to either buy a house or don't buy a house? Like, once again, I just keep going back to the same thing. I don't want this board or the board of selectmen or anybody to go, oh, you know what, I'm gonna just kind of say, you know, this house is flooded 14 times, it has been $400,000 worth of claims. Let's call this a knockdown, a demolition, whatever you want to call it, and the town of Darien is going to pick up 25% of my, you know, the FEMA's going to pick up 75. The town's going to come in over the top with 25. That's going to come out to 150, 280, whatever the number is. I just don't want that to be thought of as a default almost, right? I want there to be something in the policy where it's discretionary. Like, who knows what our situation is a year from now, 2 years from now, 5 years now, where you have to buy 28 houses? What happens if you have a huge flood, right? And somebody goes, they're just all demolished and the tab is 5.4 million. So that's all I want to say. I think the front part of this, which we've kind of debated back, I'm okay with that. Just the back end of this, I just don't want an expectation that we're going to buy everyone's
property.
house.
And we need to clarify whether or not the town actually needs to pay 25% for the property to be purchased by FEMA. Can it be purchased at 75% of market
Yes, it can
value?
be.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's what I would say in connection with this, because I feel like, you know, our board doesn't really set policy, but we try to make financial decisions based on items that come before us and think about like the policies you know, behind those. So maybe, you know, Kate and Monica, just something to kind of think about is the same way when we look at acquiring properties. Generally speaking, like when we acquired, was it Short Lane on the homeschool? We sort of have certain policies laid out where we look for properties that are contingent to other town properties, or the one down, I'm like forgetting the names of the roads now, but down by Reed Beach.
That's the short line
Where
one.
we sort of acquired that was sort of adjacent to park right down there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of value there. And I would say as we think about, and we venture down this process of going through FEMA grants, begin to think about and develop, like, what is the policy that we should be thinking about when we make these decisions? Are they
Yeah.
contingent to other properties? Is there an ability to create a sort of larger open space of a floodplain? Something that can absorb by doing this and buying some houses, we create some open space, but it's also alleviates flooding somewhere else. And we can redo, I don't know, like a river, a bank, or those type of things. Think more sort of holistically and strategically, because to the extent we need to, you know, make choices in terms of how much property we can actually buy, we'll have an ability, I think, to, you know, sort of objectively evaluate
Yes,
like the
yes,
benefits of each
yeah.
one.
I think that's an excellent thing for the new Board of Selectmen to do, perhaps in conjunction with planning and zoning.
What is the deadline for these applications to be submitted relative to these storms?
So, you know, here's the weird thing about this. Jim learned it from the call the other day. The money that will be available for this kind of purpose under the Storm Ida declaration won't actually come around for another 6 months or so. But there are almost constantly, it seems, projects or programs available. So for instance, right now, there's funding available under the COVID FEMA declaration for this type of thing. The property that we have agreed to buy on Crimmins Road, that was awarded under a FEMA declaration for a tornado in northern Fairfield County some years ago. So the deadline is, deadline under the Storm Ida funding hasn't even been set yet. But, so the deadline is kind of a moving target.
Is it feasible to table this until a policy's developed or not?
Well, yes, it's feasible.
I'm just saying, would the homeowners be harmed? Meaning a deadline has come and gone by so tabling this, or is that not a downside?
They're not harmed by missing a deadline. The harm would be in the delay in getting an application in. So, you know, they can't be considered until an application is in. So it's not like we're trying to rush to hit a January deadline right now. But the longer we wait to move forward with applications, the longer they're waiting to get an answer.
And they have the opportunity to go privately and advance it at their pace.
Well, they have the opportunity, they could pay consultants of their own and then come to us with a completed application and we submit it.
And that's what I mean, if all we had to do was submit it, we can handle that with existing staff?
I think so.
But then we need a man.
But it's, you know,
If it's
I mean,
approved, we need a
I'm not
manager.
sure that he's going to be, has the capacity to, you know, with this many applications to vet them properly. But as far as actual filing of the paperwork, I think we could do that.
But the risk, if it wasn't vetted properly, is to us or to the homeowner?
To the homeowner.
I can support this, but under the stipulation, as John and Rob have so put forth, that this is not necessarily just the first step in a series of appropriations that people should presume will be forthcoming. This is to get this set of homeowners grant process underway. But we will wait for a policy to be developed about the further expenditure of funds, either to support the 25% of the cost of the property. That's how I feel.
I mean, I think what you're saying is that we should make it clear that this doesn't, if someone's applying for an acquisition, it doesn't automatically mean that
guarantee.
it's
Yeah.
guaranteed. I think I would support this. The other thing, but what I would ask, like maybe the board of selectmen and staff to think about is, as we're sort of moving through this process, right, there are certain steps right here in terms of public information sessions and so forth, which I think are great, which could actually cause more people to sort of realize that this could be an option, or cause less when they realize how much work it is. But I would say it would be good for you all to think about a strategy in terms of how other towns are doing this. Do we pay for 100% of certain items, things like public information sessions and helping these, you know, the homeowners really get a cadence and a pulse on whether they can get approved or not, and understanding what can be a significant amount of work. And then are there other sort of aspects of, you know, the services that the town said, well, we'll cover 75% of this, and you know, maybe the resident covers 25, just to make sure that, you know, as we're thinking about appropriating these resources, because they're not unlimited, that we can make sure we have enough to cover everyone, because there could be 10 more people that come forward if we have another storm in May. So that's one suggestion I would make, just to kind of think about it. I'm sure, listen, if you wanted, you know, we've all had a lot of thinking about this, and if you wanted, you know, kind of form a little working committee and wanted some input or help from this board, you know, I'm sure somebody would be more than willing to kind of help strategize how we can kind of best leverage our dollars to help the most residents get the farthest through the process. And then I guess just one technical question in terms of the appropriation, Jen, because this is sort of an operating, in the operating budget. Is this such that if we approve 110 and come June 30th, we've only spent 80, then the other 30 is returned to the town, and then we're kind of reappropriating some for next year, fiscal 23's budget?
No,
Or
we
would
can
this
set
be-
up a special fund that will allow it to carry, the appropriation to carry over beyond the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. And would that be sort of a revenue fund, or is that just a?
It won't be a special revenue fund, because this will be funded by a contribution from the general fund. So it will just be a dedicated fund, and then in our financial statements, it'll roll up and show under the general fund. We would see storm mitigation fund, something along that line, and the amount that's remaining.
Would it be like committed fund balance?
Yes, committed.
So is this like, I think we have a couple other, we have like a small amount left in a
It's
land acquisition
the
fund,
land
like a
purchase fund
special
is the
education
exact same
fund,
way, yep.
other things like that are sitting-
Primarily funded through the general fund at some point. So since they don't stand on their own, they roll up to the general fund for reporting purposes, but they are not part of the general fund in terms of an appropriation lapsing at the end of the fiscal year.
Okay. And then because I think you understand, as you explained it, is because this is a sort of appropriation for something new that wasn't necessarily outlined in the existing budget. This is something that we would send to the RTM.
Mhm.
to
Right, rather than
appropriate.
from contingency.
Yeah, because we're not just buying more salt for the roads, we're
Right.
actually starting sort of a real new line item and expenditure and so forth. In my discussions with Jack and, you know, I've been trying to share information with him as we've all, you know, Monica and Kate, everybody sort of put a lot of work into this, and in a short amount of time, I think really trying to go from 0 to 60 on FEMA grants. I think it would be, you know, Jack has certainly indicated that he'd be willing to bring this to the F&B meeting on the 22nd to try to have, if we needed this to be appropriated on the 5th or the 6th for the state of the town, to try to work it into that. So is that sort of how we expect the process would work?
Yes.
Okay, John?
Just a point of clarification is what approval of this 110 would effectively result in the town of Darien's agreement that it will pay up to 110,000 for anyone in addition to the 10 people who come at any particular time to go through this process? In other words, anybody, if this is being approved for these 10 people, cannot the 11th person through the 40th person come up and say, we at least want the town to pay for this initial work?
Well, I think technically we're approving 110 onto a line item for you all to hire consultants.
Yes.
And those consultants, I mean, I guess if there were 20 people applying and you only had 10, you'd either only be able to pay for the half of the consultant, or you need to come back to us for more. I think,
Yes.
is that the way that you would think about?
Yes.
I think,
But isn't that discriminatory, to use the expression, on those who would not be reimbursed?
Well, no, when I say
Yeah.
50%, like, if we only ever appropriated 110 and you had 20 people apply, you'd either have to come back.
We'd have to come back if 20 people applied, and, 20 people would apply, and we could have only 3 decide to follow through, past a certain point. But if we had more people than anticipate want to go through the process, and it ends up costing us more than $110,000, and we wanted to continue the process, we would have to come back for more money.
Okay, so you'd either come back to us or at least make
Or-
sure it was sort of allocated evenly.
It's, it's not allocated to individuals,
That's an appropriate process, but the result is you're going to pay, because you're not going to turn this down at this point, because we just all agreed that we have the moral and ethical obligation to expend this money. So basically, we're effectively de facto putting a policy, even though we're hinging it on future approvals. But we're effectively setting a precedent that we will fund anybody's request for this up to the extent of 110,000.
as much as I'd like to wait for the Board of Selectmen to set policy, I think by supporting this, we are effectively setting policy saying that we will allocate taxpayer dollars to assist individual homeowners with flooding issues, and that opens a big door.
I'm sorry, not to interrupt you, but to Monica perhaps, how quickly can they have a special meeting of the Board of Selectmen and turn this around so that in fact we don't have this?
Well,
I think a policy like you're talking about will take much more time, because there are a lot of factors that would have to be weighed in terms of what types of property would be willing to acquire, what are the parameters, what are the costs, what are the benefits to the town. I think that's not a one meeting policy discussion.
That's what we're being asked to do, however.
You're being asked to fund an appropriation request.
Can I just double check one thing, Wayne? From a legal precedent standpoint, if we were to approve this time for these homeowners, while it may be a precedent in terms of a practice that the town engaged in at one point in time, it doesn't incur any, the concept of precedence doesn't hold any standing in terms of a legal standpoint, right?
It does not, no, sir.
It doesn't become a precedent that could be upheld in court in subsequent times. If further homeowners wanted us to implement the same program for them later, there's they wouldn't have legal standing to force it to occur.
The other point, and it's a good point, John, but we had a unprecedented back-to-back storms that resulted in 20 people coming forward and overwhelming the town's resource to handle it. In the future, presumably, if that happens again, we'll be having the same conversation. But if it doesn't happen again, we just get an 11th or 12th, presumably it's not part of this, wave, the town resource would be able to handle it in a normal course.
I think so. Yes.
Event.
Yes.
So I'm not concerned. I am concerned about a little bit of getting ahead of ourselves, but I think we don't need to be thinking we're establishing a precedent for every future homeowner to be getting the same benefit that this group of homeowners is getting. via the consultant.
Maybe a solution, and listen, staff always does an amazing job. I think the best way to, I think, to handle this, and I would support this, is, you know, and I support this appropriation here, is that, you know, keep us up to date. If we feel like this is going from 10 to 20 to 30 people, let's sort of have a discussion sooner rather than later, as you guys always do. You keep us up to date on everything. We watch all your meetings religiously, thanks to Channel 79, right? So I think this is something we want to keep an eye on, because it's, you know, 110 isn't that much, right? But if this were to spool up to double or triple, I think we just want to make sure that we have a good idea about what's coming down from an operating and potential, you know, acquisition standpoint. Monica?
So this is kind of a new area for us. So remember, this is time and materials, okay? So we don't know exactly, this is an estimate from the consultant. But we are not by any means making any implied or any other type of promise that we are going to be purchasing these homes. That would be clear from the get-go, that this is to help you submit the application. But just like you don't have to go through with it, whoever is the Board of Finance 3 years from now will be weighing in. The RTM will be weighing in. So this is not setting precedent that we are going to, you know, fund for the acquisition by any means.
And no funding decisions you make in any one fiscal year obligate you to the next fiscal year. And we on a regular basis, we provide grants to outside agencies. Because we did it this year, doesn't mean we have to do it next year. You know, you're not obligating the future. You know, maybe your decision to bond is obligating the future, but so many of the decisions you make to fund in the annual budget, they're not obligating you to fund the same thing in the next annual budget.
What does anyone else have?
I do. Agreed. I just wanted a policy.
I
That's all-
absolutely,
that's all we're asking.
no, I agree with you.
Yeah.
I think, you know, because if we get to the point where one of these homes is something that is approved for an acquisition, in order to make our case to all the boards, we should be able to state that this is why we should buy this one. You know, this is what it does for the taxpayers.
Okay. Wayne, one quick, just reading your note, just want to clarify one thing. So to get one of the grants, the area has to be presidential declared disaster,
Which it is, yes, sir.
which one it is.
Yes, sir.
But in the future, if you want to call it that, anybody who has major flooding, but the area is not declared a disaster, cannot apply for the grant, correct? So even if you have repeated flooding and it's not declared a disaster,
Yeah.
you're kind of out of luck a little bit, right?
No,
In
no.
terms of just getting a grant.
No, you can
One-
apply under a different program.
The individual assistant one.
No,
they-
you can apply under the flood mitigation act.
hazard
right now.
mitigation.
There are different mitigation programs.
Right,
That's
so
being
the-
one of them.
What's more
The
important.
hazard one is the one I'm talking about.
Yes,
Has to be declared a
Yes.
grant, okay.
So it's really important for the homeowners, you know, get flood insurance. You may not think you're in a flood zone or that you need flood insurance, but they should get flood insurance. And if you have losses, they should be filing the claims. You know, sometimes what's happening is people have losses and they're not filing with the National Flood Insurance Program because they don't have insurance, and that, so they haven't built up kind of the case history. That where you get to the point where your losses have been repetitive and severe, and you have a good case for the acquisition claim or the elevation claim.
Well, I think if you're in a flood zone, AU especially, if you have a mortgage in a house, the mortgage company's gonna force you to get flood insurance,
Yeah.
me too.
Yeah,
And if you don't have a mortgage, then it becomes what you just talked about, Kate, which is you should actually probably go out and get yourself
Yeah.
some flood insurance.
but you don't actually have to be
But
in
you
a
don't
flood
have to.
zone.
There's no lien holder who's gonna say,
That
I
you
need
must.
you to get
Yeah.
flood insurance. Okay.
I'll just explain that I won't support this. I don't see the difference between spending the money to buy the property and the money we will spend to hire a consultant to help them apply when the homeowner has the option to do it themselves, so. That's where I stand.
Okay. Any other discussion?
There's a sentence, the last sentence in the third paragraph of Wayne's letter says, if the town decides against appropriating funds to assist with grants. They could still direct local residents to apply to FEMA directly under the Individual Assistance Program. Is that an equivalent program? The previous sentence says, keep in mind that the Individual Assistance Program simply provides for grants for basic needs such as electricity and other basic needs. But is that a true alternative? I mean, how does this work?
That is, the other program is a different concept. The other program is primarily to assist people that may have needs they can't pay their electric bills or something of that nature. It's a different concept. They can go there directly. They don't have to go through FEMA, but it's a different concept.
Okay. So all those in favor of item number 5, the appropriation for the $110,000 for the Board of Selectmen to hire the outside consultants to assist with the grants?
Jim, I think we've got to move it first. Move it forward.
Okay. Can I have a motion to, thanks Rob, to approve the $110,000 appropriation to be sent to the RTM for the Board of Selectmen to hire an outside consultant? Rob, so moved.
Second.
David, second.
I would perhaps add an amendment that basically says and that the Board of Selectmen is directed or asked or requested politely to arrive at an appropriate policy going forward that will effectively give us better parameters for approving these requests in the future. I didn't say it very well, but that's what I...
Okay, well, understanding the amendment, I guess what I would say is I wouldn't want to tie some type of policy to this, just given that Monica said, I mean, and Kate both said, I think this is worthwhile to kind of come up and think through this. But it sounds like this isn't a sort of week, 2-week exercise. It feels like this is a few months, and I think it'll probably be developed a little bit in terms of seeing how these applications all come in and so forth. And so why I think, I think sort of us asking them sort of as a board, I think is, I would say is enough rather than sort of tying it to the amendment, because I feel like that legally could make it tricky in terms of when they do. But I have full confidence that they will think about this.
And Monica's nodding her head.
Vote.
So, John, do you want to withdraw the proposed amendment?
Okay.
Okay, so withdrawn. So all those in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? 5-1, it passes. Okay. So the next item is, I think, what's really described more as a sort of technical amendment. We approved a couple months ago the purchase of 27 Crimmins as part of one of the FEMA HMGA grant programs. Under that, the FEMA pays for 75% of the purchase price of the home, and the town pays for 25%, agrees to demolish it and keep it as open space. We approved the 25% to ultimately be sent to the RTM for approval. As Kate laid out in the memo, or Jen laid out in the memo, is that we actually need to approve the full amount of $669,100, and then will be reimbursed by FEMA the 75%. So there's a resolution I sent around earlier that will be sent to the RTM, effectively canceling, Wayne, I believe, the original resolution that we sent around, or they didn't approve it yet, did they?
This one I have not, no, sir.
Okay, so this will be a new resolution that goes to the RTM for the full
This will be in- I
669.
believe this will be in the December meeting. I believe this will be before the RTM in their December meeting.
Okay, but they never approved the original one, did they?
They did, they approved the 167 already.
So this will effectively cancel the existing one and create a new one?
We're amending it to increase the appropriation
To
by the
669.
501.
Okay. So in terms of, I had one question. What is the timing and or the risk as it relates to getting the 75% match from FEMA?
The risk that we won't get it?
Yes, and or the timing. Is it contemporaneous with our actual purchase?
No, we'll have to write the check and then submit for reimbursement.
Okay.
I saw Mark McEwen at the COVID clinic this morning, and he told me that his current understanding is that FEMA reimburses once a quarter. So I don't know that that means we would get reimbursed within 1 quarter, but that's what he said to me.
I would say it depends on where in the quarter, you
Fair enough.
fall.
Yeah, fair enough.
And then, is there anything else changing as it relates to this purchase?
We sure hope not.
Is there a reason we need to do this before we receive the FEMA funds?
Yes, because we have to lay out the full amount of the purchase, and then they will
On a
reimburse us
timeline.
afterwards.
Oh, that's just the way it works.
Yeah.
And do we have a timing for the expected closing?
I don't know if he's talked to you, the indication I had was that we expect it to be closing early in the new year.
Okay. And in terms of getting the funds back, do we get them, do we also have to complete the demolition and the restoration to the as-is state before we get the 75% match, or once we buy it? do
I would
we-
expect we'll file for the whole thing at once, so yes.
Okay. Okay, any other questions on this? Okay, can I have a motion to approve? Rob, so moved. Dan seconded. All those in favor? Unanimous. Okay, the next item is, this was related to the Board of Ed pickup trucks. As you guys recall, there were 3 trucks that were lost in the first of the 2 storms. Insurance, less the deductible, covered the market value of the trucks because some of them were 2, 4, 8 years old and so forth. We actually appropriated the full amount, which is approximately 160,000, Jen, I think originally?
147.
147 for the entire amount, and then we received the insurance proceeds back. Those went directly into the general fund?
They haven't gone anywhere yet because, well, yeah, they're in the bank, but we have to appropriate them to your capital reserve.
Okay. So this motion will, the RTM on its December meeting will then take and appropriate those back into our capital contingency, which is where we originally appropriated the 147,000 from.
Correct.
So this is just really reimbursing us for the net back into our capital contingency, which will put it back up at, sort of net 230,000.
253.
253.
More or less.
Give or take.
So any other questions? Is there a motion? John, so moved.
So moved.
Taylor, seconded. All in favor? John, in favor?
I'm in favor, yes.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so we're done spending money. Now on to the meetings for the next year.
No, we don't.
Who put the first draft? Was it you put the draft together in this?
I did, just following our usual dates.
Did we look at like spring break for?
Yeah, at the bottom of the page, the school breaks February 21 to 25. We
Thank you.
avoided that by meeting on February 15th, and they have April 11th to 15th. So we're meeting on April 5th. The only thing that's not accounted for here is the current planned last day of school, if anyone has graduation activities, but that's kind of subject to change anyway. So we've scheduled the regular 3rd Tuesday of the month for June.
How about snow days? Is there snow days in
The only snow day that we'll ever do.
If you could tell me when it's
is
gonna
February.
snow, I'd be making $1 million.
And Jen,
That's
correct me,
special information.
and correct me if I'm wrong, but we'll file these regular meetings with the town clerk, and those will become our official sort of meeting schedules. And so therefore, because it's a regular meeting, we can always add, subtract, and change the agenda and so forth as items come up. And to the extent we needed to change the calendar, I think so long as we change it 30 days prior.
30 days prior, and it can still be a regular meeting.
Yes, so if we needed to change one more than like 31 days in advance, we could do it, so it would be a regular meeting. Otherwise, if we have to add an extra meeting, it's a special agenda, it's a special item, special meeting,
Yep.
and therefore we can't really add or subtract items onto the agenda.
How far in advance for a regular meeting does the agenda have to be?
24, I always get either 24 or 48 hours, I think it's.
And to add an agenda item after it's been filed requires a 2/3 vote?
Correct.
So you can always add something, but you
Yep,
need
you can
2/3
add it
vote.
at the meeting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Always to a regular
Good.
meeting.
Yeah, yep. For a regular meeting.
Yeah, and for a special meeting, I think we only need to file 24 hours ahead.
24 hours, but you have to stick to what's on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So does anyone have any questions or issues on this?
That's good.
Okay. To the extent, you know,
Do we have to approve it?
yeah, I think we do need to approve, right, Jen?
Yeah, you can just
Yeah.
make a motion to
I
approve.
think to the extent, you know, the Board of Ed is just finalizing its meeting schedule, and there might be a little bit of tinkering with that, I think, with the budget schedule. So to the extent we needed to move things around a day or so we can always sort of refile it in the future, so. Have a motion to approve? Rob? Second? Dan? All in favor? Okay. Joint financial report?
I feel like a broken record all the time. Revenues are tracking very well, property taxes, compared to prior 5 years, we've collected a larger percentage of our budget than we have in the past. The actual collection rates, according to the tax collector, is consistent with prior years, so we're looking good there. Under other revenues, Park and Rec program fees is running pretty hot again this year, so I'm gonna start to include that over in the comments. So they had a budget of $665 so far this year. They've taken in $475 through October. So similar to last year, if this continues, they will bring in much more revenue than budgeted, but they will also incur expenses above what they budgeted. So we'll probably have to address that. But to give you a little preview, we have a solution to that you'll see in the fiscal '23 budget, which will eliminate some of this playing catch-up because of volatility. On intergovernmental, those are tracking as expected. We did receive, I'm going to walk through this a little bit more for the benefit of the new members. We did receive a new revenue source that we had not expected. I'll go into that in a future page. We have specifics on intergovernmental revenues. The town clerk, continued high volume of real estate transactions, so they have already brought in nearly 62% of their $1.6 million budget. The pace seems to be falling off a little bit when I look year over year on what they've brought in each month, so it might be cooling down a little bit, but I would be very surprised if we did not exceed that $1.6 million budget. And then on building permits, our normal base revenue is consistent with prior years, and this budget includes only $379,000 for permits for the redevelopment projects.
Hey, Jen, can you remind me again, what's other taxes? What do we have in that line?
Prior year taxes, interest and lien fees, that kind of stuff.
Okay.
The prior year taxes, we don't have all that much because we have such a good collection rate
Yeah.
in the current years.
Okay.
So permits are expected to come in around budget or no? What did you mean? I'm sorry.
For
Building permits.
building permits, I think we will, for this year, we will probably actually get that permit revenue in the door.
Really?
And the prior years, we were budgeting about $750,000. It's brought down in this year. It's gotta happen sometime. But I think the two things that we've talked about with building permits is kind of that base permit revenue, which is around $1.2 million. That's on track, maybe even a little ahead this year, a little bit more than prior years. But then there's always that redevelopment component. And with it being smaller than in the prior years and how much time has elapsed and the work that we see going on, I would expect that permit revenue to come in the door this year.
Jen, on that other, you know, the sort of the big three redevelopment projects, is it down because we've kind of forecast it to be, I think we were assuming like 750. Did we collect some of it? Or is it all?
We collected a small amount, but we have not collected 750 yet.
Okay.
So the way that the prior building official was doing it, he was assuming, I think the 750 was like about 50% of what the expected building permit revenue was, and he was carrying that time and time again. And then for fiscal '23, he reduced it because of timing. And it really is just, when it comes in, it will come in. But I think this is an attainable budget number for this year.
Okay.
So the next few pages, the next two pages, 2 and 3, go through our expenditure side. And everything right now is tracking as expected. If it were just a straight line, every month we spend the same, we would expect to see 33% expended just because of the number of months that have elapsed. But we do have seasonality in some of our departments, and some of the departments have pretty large annual expenditures that they either pay early in the year or that they will encumber, because we do look at our number is year-to-date expended plus encumbered, what's already committed. But nothing raising an eyebrow at the moment. All the departments are where we would expect them to be at this time. Page 4 is where we have a summary of our state revenues. The third one down, the tiered pilot, was a new program in the state budget for fiscal '22. So we're getting $66,000 for that, but we are not getting the line above it, the $10,948, so about a $55,000 net increase in the state revenue. Other than that, we have received our first educational cost-sharing payment on schedule, and everything else is as expected. Page 5 summarizes our contingency accounts and our fund balance. So the capital reserve that we talked about is in the middle of that top row. BOF capital reserve, and what you see down at the bottom of that is the pending drainage studies of $84,000 that you approved, and the pending BOE insurance claim, adding back in the $82,741. So once that is finalized by the RTM, the available balance will be $253. We haven't had any more draws from the administrative capital reserve. The last one was town hall security improvements on October 13th. That was for an additional door. And everything else is pretty quiet.
Jen, on page 4, under the reserve for capital non-recurring, will you remind me what the LoSiP grant was for?
LoSiP is every year we get an allocation, and we apply it towards our paving program.
Okay, so this is not the supplemental amount for the west?
No, that was that one was LOTSIP. This is LoSiP, which is an
The
annual
acronyms are
local
gonna
capital
kill me.
improvement.
And on page, again, page 5 again for my education, there's an asterisk under the unspent fund balance account. It says does not include anticipated fiscal 2022 projection. How do I interpret that in terms of thinking about this account? What does that mean to me?
That means that we are assuming that we are budgeting geniuses and we are going to take in exactly what we budgeted on the revenue side and spend exactly what we budgeted on the expenditure side, which we all know is not the case. So historically, we have brought in more in revenue than we have expended, and so the fund balance grows.
Right.
I see no reason at this point in time that that wouldn't happen again this year.
Okay.
So basically, this is like an anticipated surplus or shortfall.
Right, it doesn't include the anticipated surplus or shortfall.
Right, it's not any pluses or minuses projected for fiscal '22. It just assumes we were spot on with the budget.
Right. And this is a little further in the weeds. Will you remind me the way that we set the collection rate at 25 basis points at the 5-year average? How much does that work out to be? Dollar-wise?
It's a few $100,000. That 25 basis points gives us a few $100,000
I was thinking
cushion.
about somewhere around 300-ish, I think, right?
Yeah.
Is that right?
I think tax revenues are generally 140-ish, right?
Yep. 49,
Yeah,
40.
I got you. That just gives us, that's some of the cushion that leads to the excess in prior years.
Correct.
Not guaranteed for this year, but.
Correct. But we also do historically have surpluses on the expenditure side. It's not all
No,
on
I got
the,
it. Yeah.
it's not all because of what happens on the revenue side. On page 6 is a report for the sewer fund. Page 7 is the parking fund. These are two special revenue funds that we have. The sewer fund is for sewer operations, so those residents who pay sewer bills, sewer service charges, those come into this fund, and this fund is used to operate our sewer department. The collection period is in October, so that's why we see about 67% collected through the end of October, and that's consistent with collections from prior years. And then the expenditures, the big one that we have is our sewer treatment payment to Stanford. On the parking fund, this is for the train station lots and for people who purchase a permit, pay at the pay stations, get ticketed in those lots. That money comes into the parking fund and supports the operation of those parking lots. So the parking permit renewal period is underway. So we've actually exceeded our budget on that because it was adjusted downward, just anticipating impacts from COVID, but we've seen a lot of people wanting to renew their permits, so that's very good because this fund did take a hit during COVID. And then the final pages, 8, 9, and 10, give you a summary of where we are on our active bonded projects. Big one being Oxbridge Elementary School. I'm happy to report that we have taken in $789,000 from the first state grant filing that the Board of Ed did. They're working on the second filing now, so they're going to be doing those periodically, and we'll be getting state grant revenue in throughout the duration of the project, and then it will get closed out at the end. I'm waiting for a cash flow on Oxbridge Elementary School. I should have that at the end of this week, beginning of next week. And then once I have that in December, I will bring to you a proposed bond amount and structure, and we'll have a conversation with our financial advisor about the next bond issue. I think we're going to be looking to do that end of February, beginning of March. It was pushed back a little bit, waiting on the numbers from Oxbridge. That's going to be the big number that we actually bond, so we want to make sure that we have a good feel for what their cash flow needs are. But in that same issue, we'll close out some of these other projects that are substantially done or that are complete, and begin funding some of these new ones that are getting underway.
Jen, do you anticipate wrapping any other capital projects into that bond issue? Or will it be solely for Oxbridge?
There will be other ones, like the one that springs to mind, high school tennis courts. It is completely done. We know exactly what we spent, the $525,000, top right on page 9. So we'll include that. We'll include what we've spent so far on the sewer infrastructure, and clean up little odds and ends that are, if the project is complete and we just have to issue the last piece of it, we'll clean those up.
Perfect, thank you.
And the Royal Roof, that's the one I think they're just starting now.
They're just starting
right?
that, yes. So, for instance, on that one, we won't issue anything because if there's delays in them getting started, we have the money in the general fund that can fund the project until we do go out and issue for that one.
Jen, on the Holmes roof and the Hinley roof, there's state grants here.
Yes.
Are we anticipating not getting that on the Holmes?
No, we do anticipate getting it. They just haven't applied for it yet.
Okay.
On both of those roof projects, but these are the most recent estimates of what they expect to receive.
Okay, thanks.
So actually, on both of those, if you look at Holmes, the total project was $1,020,000. That's what we actually issued for bonds. If they get the $70,000, we will reprogram. I'll come to you and ask you to kind of reprogram that additional $70,000 that we issued to another project.
Yep.
And I think I saw Mike Lynch, like the Board of Ed just signed off, I think, on applying for that grant
Perfect.
a few weeks ago, so.
And that is all I have to say.
So in terms of the approval of the minutes, I know, a few of you are new to the board. My understanding is that even if you were not a member of the board or present at that meeting, you can vote on them, but or otherwise abstain. But we do have a majority of the people that were present. So regarding the minutes for the October 19th meeting, I had one comment.
I wasn't there, so you're gonna need one person.
Well, I think we'll still have a majority, right? In terms of the page 6, Dan? It said, when we were congratulating Mr. Zagrodsky and Mr. Huck for their time served, the last sentence said both men made the 7 board members miraculously work together. I don't actually think there was any miracles formed right there. I think that should read, both men led the 7 board members to work together.
I'd say meticulous.
Was that your editorial
Yeah,
comment, Jen, or was it mine?
I don't think I said they were working miracles, although the two of them probably can, but
I'm sorry, can you say one more time where that is?
do you have that right there?
And
Yeah, so
first
the,
paragraph under the old-
So under other business on page
Yeah.
6, the first paragraph, the last sentence now reads,
Gotcha.
both men led instead of made the 7 board members to work together, rather, and strike the word miraculously. That might have been the stenographer's observation.
And Taylor, you pointed out that you were absent, correct?
Yeah, I'm
That's, I
not
think-
listed.
And you're not listening, right? I just
Yeah.
get that. Okay.
So is there a motion to approve these minutes?
I'll move.
Dan, so moved. Rob seconded. Okay, all those in favor, voting in favor of approval of minutes?
Jim, in that I watched the video and didn't see anything that could contradict the minutes. Is that a good yes? Okay.
Yes.
Great.
Okay.
I did as well.
So we're going to be 5 yeses?
Yeah, yes.
Yep. And any against?
Abstention, I wasn't there.
Any abstentions? Okay, so 5, 0, and 1. Okay. The next item is committee assignments. You know, the Board of Finance has a number of either subcommittees within the Board of Finance or other sort of town committees that we appoint individuals to. Jen listed, well, there are 5 listed here. You know, on the audit committee, you know, it's over the past couple of years, it's been myself, Rob, and Taylor. On the Oxbridge Building Committee, you know, this is a town committee appointed by the Board of Selectmen. Dan has been our rep there for the past year and a half. For the ARPA committee, this is a committee that the Board of Selectmen is setting up in order to look at how we can best spend and allocate the $6+ million that we received under the from federal funding. I think at Jen, 2 meetings ago, I think we appointed
Dan as the Board of Finance representative, and Frank was
And Frank.
appointed as the chair's designee.
chair's designee.
Yes.
So I think we're set there. We should probably confirm with Frank that he's still, you know, kind of willing to do that, but I'm sure he is. I think on the IT steering committee, we appointed Rob to that.
Correct.
Probably only 4 or 5 months ago, right?
No less than that.
Okay.
We're actually meeting for the first time on Thursday.
Okay.
Fun.
And then, you know, is this the town hall employees?
This is the town hall union negotiations that Frank was the representative, but with him being off the board, we should appoint someone new.
Okay. Well, on that, I had served for the past couple sort of public works and other ones. I think just given some work that I have going on, I'd be happy to kind of be replaced. Is there anyone that has interest in serving on this? And Jen, do you want to talk about maybe when we think it'll actually kick off?
It has already kicked off. We started having negotiations maybe last spring. They've been on and off. There's some agreement on some items. There's some still being discussed. So we're kind of getting towards the end of the process. Hopefully it'll get finalized soon.
Okay. Well, does anyone have interest in serving on that committee? I think it's generally like a 4-month, 3-month commitment maybe?
Yeah, and negotiations are typically afternoons, early afternoon, here at Town Hall.
Although the one I last served on, I think went for 12 months due to COVID. Hopefully it wasn't my presence. But does anyone have interest, either John or David or Taylor on that? It does involve sort of afternoon meetings here at Town Hall.
I'm here in the afternoons, so
Okay, would you,
Yeah,
let
that's
you do that?
fine. Yeah.
Okay, well, can I have a motion to appoint John as our representative to the Town Hall Employees Union negotiations? David moved, Rob seconded, all in favor? Okay. And, you know, Jen, just in terms of other, do we also have a shared services? Is that still active? 'Cause I
I
think
don't
Frank.
think that's still active.
Okay.
You could designate someone in the event that it does become active again, or you could just wait and see, but that is not currently active.
Okay.
Same with Weed Beach, we did have somebody, and that is kind of on hold for the time being.
What about the, what about the 3 elementary school build-outs? That's got a building
Yeah.
committee, right?
Has that been formed by the Board of Selectmen yet?
I don't know.
I think it's
Saying
been
yes.
formed, but when I spoke with Sarah earlier in the week, they haven't met yet.
Okay. But is there a Board of Finance representative?
And there will be one, I assume there's gonna be one needed, so while you're here, in anticipation of that forming, you could appoint somebody for when it is formed.
And was there a fire truck or fire equipment committee we were gonna put together? We talked about it.
There is. I don't know that we have, I don't know that's been created yet by the Board of Selectmen.
I don't believe it has.
It hasn't.
But the building
And
committee,
what about pension? Is that a
Paul.
committee, or, I know it's
That's
Paul,
Paul.
I didn't,
Yeah.
hopefully it'll say
God.
Paul, but is that like a committee assignment or a
Yeah, we
special
do.
assignment
Yes.
that should be
He's not
listed
here.
as well? Right, pension.
If you're not here, you
Yeah,
get,
we want-
you get it.
There's not a people problem.
No, he's been on, you know.
and Jen, maybe on this, do you think you could just put together, just so that we have it, we all have it in front of us, a list of who's on each committee?
Sure.
So it sounds like, Paul, I think recently came onto the pension committee a couple of years ago, right? I think when John stepped down.
Right.
So I think
Yeah.
really the big one we have is the building committee for the 3 elementary schools, additions and/or
Right.
roofs and improvements and so forth. And does anyone have interest in that? I mean, that's there's generally a fair amount of meetings sort of kicking things off, like during the day. You know, I think they've had a lot of those in the morning.
My experience on the Oxbridge Building Committee is, and I don't know that it'll be run identically, probably not identically, but maybe similarly, is it's a once a month, Thursday morning at 10, 1-hour call. And now, that project is up and going, so probably a little bit more intensive at the beginning, I would guess.
Yeah, I do think for the building permits, in the beginning, when you're interviewing owners, reps, and project managers and all of that, there's a fair amount of, kind of during the day type meetings. Does anyone have interest in that?
Are you interested?
I may not be able to do it.
Okay. I'd be happy to do it if we need somebody to do that.
Okay.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so can I have a motion to appoint David to the, Dan? So moved. Second, Rob? All those in favor? Okay, unanimous. I did the cafeteria, so that was,
I think it's something that's gonna be important for the town, and it'll be a great learning experience for me, so it should be fun.
that's great, thank you, David. In terms of special assignments and committee reports, I think, does anyone have from their respective committees, Dan, anything on Oxbridge? I know we have scheduled next week, or sorry, next month.
Yeah, so next month, Kip Coons, who's chairing the Oxbridge Building Committee, has agreed to come to our meeting and give us a fulsome report. I'll just reel some highlights. We are 63% completed on the academic wing, 72% complete on site work, and right now, our current budget for the project, this is a construction budget, not all in because it's got other items beyond construction, is $51.2 million, which is up just about $350,000 from the original construction budget, so pretty well managed on that front. And we have a $1.3 million available in allowances and contingency funds. So
those are the highlights, and Kip will get into the details next month.
Okay.
You said the budget 51.2? I thought it was 63.
No, the 63 is for everything.
Everything.
That includes retaining, that includes, project fees or architect fees. This is just to build it.
Okay.
I think nothing new on audit. I think we're getting close.
Yeah.
It's taking a little longer. We, for those of you that don't know, we had engaged Bloom Shapiro. They were acquired by CLA. So now with Bloom going into the larger organization, I think it's just been a little bit of a clunkier process as they're learning what CLA is looking for. We're about to go into second review. We're finishing some things up, but based on what our auditors have seen come out of CLA's second reviews, they're coming back to us because now they know what CLA is asking. So we're providing them some more information. So I would have expected that we would have had a draft by now. We don't yet, but we should be able to file on time. It's just a little bit lengthier because of the change in firm.
What's our filing date?
December 31st.
Ooh, cutting it.
And obviously, we'll need to roll that into the OM in terms of for February, March.
Right, that's another reason for, we don't need the cash from a bond issue right away. So I would rather that we can have the updated financials in the OS for the next issue.
Okay. And Jen, just kind of thinking about the OS, just because perhaps that's part of other business here, but I do remember it seemed like there needed to be a little bit of updating in there, just in terms of.
Yeah, we had some stale language.
Yeah, population and stuff like that. So.
Yeah.
I don't know, is that something that you'll typically handle with the advisors? Do you need anyone assigned or kind of partnering with you on that from our board?
So the financial advisor has his typical set of tables that he and I work on to update. I think a lot of what we found was in some of the descriptions and that sort of thing, there was still language. So if someone wants to volunteer to be a second set of eyes and reviewing that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. I think we can think about.
I'd be happy to do it. I've seen a couple indentures in my life.
Yeah.
Perfect.
That's great. And Jen, maybe even perhaps just
After 20 years on my
if we
side.
want more eyes on it, we could always see if there's somebody, perhaps an individual from like TGSNA, if we wanted somebody to, if we needed.
I would be reluctant to have too many parties involved because we'll have a pretty tight schedule.
Yep.
For turning that around and being able to get it all done and do our call with Moody's and all of that. So I'm just fearful that if we have too many people looking at it, there's just more time that it takes because people are busy and they can't get to it. And I think one additional member of the Board of Finance reviewing it should be sufficient because it's pretty standard information. It's a little stale.
We just want to update, I think, for things like population and the football record and.
Well, population always
Like
gets
that, right?
updated,
Who
but
started at
football record
quarterback
we haven't
last
touched in years.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
Maybe we can have something in there in terms of like the Darien versus New Canaan record or something.
We might have new census data for the population stuff, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mark, our financial advisor, pulls all of that together. And when we do come forward with a bond sizing and structure, we'll have Mark here. You can provide some education to new members on the bonding process.
Okay. Well, I guess in terms of Chairman's report, I'll keep it short here. I think, in terms of what's coming down the line, obviously the budget process is already kicked off, both on the Board of Selectmen side and on the Board of Ed side, and ultimately we'll start seeing, countless hours of meetings and everything going into like December and January and so forth. Dan and I spoke briefly about, sort of an overall schedule and so forth, and I think how, given that we've had some change in terms of the membership on the committee, in terms of replacing some of the areas where John and Frank served on. Generally, we have sort of 2 or sometimes 3 people on each different sections and so forth. So what I was going to suggest is, Dan, you and I over the next week or so can kind of work on, finalize some of the things that we've spoken about. We'll send some suggestions around in terms of, who's, how we think you could all work together and choose some different areas, and then certainly welcome your feedback. And I think we'll try to thread that in as well as some ideas we have in terms of how we can kind of be most efficient working with the RTM and our staff to sort of make sure we sort of get everyone's questions answered and really use the town staff and department heads as efficiently as possible. So that's all sort of TBD. Expect that like in the next week or so, and we can discuss that more at our next meeting.
And continue with the buddy system with the F&B folks, right?
Yeah, I think we had some ideas about kind of putting down a description of actually what we'll do, and I think
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe an evolution of that to make sure everyone feels fully engaged,
and we have some idea in scheduling and
while
so forth.
respecting the time and
Yeah.
of the staff. Yep.
And we'll coordinate that like with Jack and everything to make sure that.
Yeah, to your point, we just want to be efficient in what we're doing, not
Yes.
double questions, all those things.
Okay. So unless anyone has any other business?
Well, no business per se, but you put out the annual time schedule for meetings. Can someone put together some sort of guidance as to time commitments for these other activities, that as to when we need to reserve additional time to spend on a board business? In other words, if we're looking over the Board of Education budget, when does that occur? When do we have to be available for that?
So if you look at the schedule, the Board of Finance kind of gets formally pulled into the budget process. The first Tuesday in March, the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen will come here and they will formally present their budgets to you.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next week you have a required public hearing on the budget. And then after that is when your work sessions will begin. But prior to that first meeting in Tuesday, or the first Tuesday in March, that meeting, the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen will be working on their budgets. And what we will do is once they have their budget schedules set, we will provide to you when their meetings are, so you can either attend or watch the Vimeos through Channel 79 to get up to speed on their budgets. But your formal work and your formal part of the process begins that first Tuesday in March.
Okay, thank you.
So just to expand upon what Jen was saying is, think about our schedule that's out there now, and it'll just be exploded more. And literally, it'll go back to January, and like on these dates, there'll be when the school tours are on, when the Board of Education is doing their public meeting. So it'll explode it out more, John, so you can see kind of almost start to finish all the way through, which is, I think, really helpful. And I don't know if John did it or
John did
Jen.
that, but I think it was a good template to follow.
It was great, because then
We'll use the
we
same
knew it was kind of
structure.
happening every week. Because a lot of some of the stuff is front loaded, right? January, February, quite a bit of stuff. Board of Selectmen got signed off last year, Feb 8, 5, 7, 9,
Yeah.
something like that. So it'll allow us, and especially the new members, well, Dave's seen this, you'll kind of get a real good accurate estimation of what time and which meetings are being done. Board of Selectmen, that budget, you almost have like 2 straight days where you go through the entire budget. Like everybody kind of goes in front of you guys and makes their pitch.
Right, we'll have about 3 or 4 meetings in a row, and what it'll show on the schedule is which departments are going to be discussed on which day. So if you're assigned to a particular department, you can zero in on that one.
And that's why it's important for us to each have our budget assignments prior to when that first meeting starts, which I think is usually the Board of Ed all-day session, right? It's the
Or the
first
January,
budget
yeah.
meeting between either of the two departments. So that'll be settled by,
Yes.
by the next meeting.
Yeah,
right?
they already have theirs laid out. I think there may be a couple small changes they were looking at, but there'll be between January and April, there'll be a series of like 40 different meetings, just, in terms of all their department heads, when the Board of Ed is doing all of theirs, and we'll key it up with the Vimeo links and so forth so that you can click right on it, and
Okay.
there'll be no shortage of the ability to watch and listen to Vimeos.
Or participate if you're in
Yeah.
person and ask questions then as well. I mean,
Yeah.
those are public meetings, right?
Because, although it formally comes to us in March, we want to be reviewing it early, and to the extent we have questions or concerns or want to sort of give feedback, it's always good to give the Board of Selectmen feedback before the 5 of them actually vote on it. And so they can think about it and debate and so forth, because they generally want to hear our concerns before they have to vote on it. And I think the same thing with the Board of Ed. So, it's really although it's sequential in terms of the operating boards, Board of Finance and RTM, we really want to give feedback sort of, to the step before us.
Dan had asked about the February break and on the schedule and all. Do these meetings tend to honor that break, or do people work right through it?
Yeah.
We try to avoid the school breaks, and then the Board of Ed avoids those as well. With February break being February 21st to 25th, I'm sure the Board of Selectmen will be wrapped up with their budget meetings by then.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, that's late, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I thought that was late too.
Mhm.
Okay. Then maybe just kind of finish up a little bit. I think, we have the BOF at darien.ct.gov email. You both have now been added to that, so we can use that to communicate. And then in terms of OpenGov.
Yep.
David, I think you probably already have a login created and so forth to go through?
I do.
Yep.
To go through that?
So John will be added, and as we're getting ready so John, the town side budget, the Board of Selectmen's budget is developed in a platform called OpenGov. And what we did last year was, rather than printing budget books for the boards to review, all the review was done online, where you can see the accounts, and then you can drill down and see itemizations of what's making up the numbers in those accounts. So I will give you access. You'll get a kind of welcome email from OpenGov. And I will also recirculate instructions that we had from last year on how you get in there, how you navigate, how you see what you want to see, just as a refresher, because it's been a while.
Okay, thank you.
So no paper books, right?
No.
You see the sadness in my voice when I said that?
Yeah.
I heard it, yes.
Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, can I have a motion to adjourn? Rob? Dan,
Everybody's got
second.
their hand.
Everyone in favor? So adjourned.